Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Israel. Man, I hope everybody is having a blessed day of rest. I hope if you're watching this, you are able to enter into the Sabbath day rest that the Most High Yah has set apart. In today's Sabbath day teaching, I'm going to be covering a lot of Bible that you are not going to get in organized world religion that discovers the rich history and exposes the fact that the heathens' goal has always been to defile your temple. When we look at Hebraic Israelite history, man, it goes, 10 times deeper than what, children get in Western culture, as far as Black history. And I've done teachings before talking about, when race theory and the concept, the term race came about. But in today's message, it's very important that as the remnant children of Yasharel that have been scattered, and currently are in exile, wake up, that we understand just the truth in our identity. Because if you are somebody, who has Israelite, lineage and ties, ancestry, and you go to these places of religion, i.e. Christendom, they are going to tell you that you are a Gentile. They're going to teach you from the perspective of the Gentile. And that's very detrimental because they will teach you to transgress the laws of the Most High Yah. And you may not realize that a lot of their Gentile customs, traditions, and ways are in violation of what the Most High Yah has commanded in the Torah. A constant argument between commandment keepers and those in religion is saying that the pig is a clean animal. But furthermore, I want you to understand that the Gentile or the heathens push, to have swine in everything, to have pig in everything, is rooted back to a way deeper biblical truth that world religion is not going to give you. You're not going to hear this in Christianity. You're not going to hear this in Catholicism, because they are promoting transgress the laws of the Most High Yah. This is why they say the laws are done away with. If they can indoctrinate you with that, then they will get you to adopt their customs and become Hellenistic. And I'll show you today in today's Sabbath teaching, how they forced a lot of this stuff on the children of Yasharel, and some of them became Hellenistic. But then there was others who died for righteousness' sake. Before I go any further, man, I want to make sure you smash that like button. Doesn't cost you anything, helps this content, beat this YouTube algorithm, and helps it get out there to people that need to hear it. Lastly, consider subscribing to the channel. If you subscribe, turn your notifications on, set them to all notifications. That way you can see when I'm dropping new content. Why are we here today? Exodus chapter 20 verses 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy Yah. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Man, this is very important. And the reason I do this every Shabbat is, man, we are commanded to guard these things. We are commanded to be obedient to the instructions of the Most High Yah. Not try to carnally weasel our way out of it like the Gentiles have done, like the heathens have done. Mark chapter 5, verse 1 through 13. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of Gerasenes, and when Yahushua had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Okay? He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Yahushua from afar, he ran and fell down before him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Yahushua, son of the Most High Yah? I adore you by Yah. Do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Yahushua asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. And they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. Now, pigs on their own are unclean animals by their diet, by the things that they eat. Okay? And here we see Yahushua pretty much taking these unclean spirits and putting them into the doggone pigs. And then these pigs pretty much running off into the sea and dying. And I'm gonna establish that as the baseline. Okay, Acts chapter 5, verse 28 through 30. For it seemed good to the Ruach HaKodesh and to us to lay upon you no greater burden than these necessary things, that you abstain from meat offered to idols, and from blood, and from things strangled, and from fornication, for which if you keep yourselves, you shall do well, you shall fare well. Okay, one has to ask themselves when breaking this down, it's one thing to read it, but I've been saying recently, reading and studying have two different meanings. So you have to ask yourself, what are meats offered unto idols? Because the Most High is telling us to abstain from meats offered to idols. Abstain. That doesn't permit us to eat them. So you have to ask yourself, okay, now I need to do some research, some study, a deep dive in different meats offered to idols. And when we look at the pig, when we look at the swine, I'm going to show you today how these Romans, these Greeks, these Gentiles knew that this stuff was offered unto their deities, and they forced it upon the children of Yashriel. And then the children of Yashriel adopted this as if it was our original culture. And now it's adopted in what they call soul food. Verse 30. So when they were dismayed, they came to Antioch, and when they had gathered the multitude there, they delivered the epistle. So I want you to understand, last week I talked about the rich, Gentile history and the abominations that was committed at Antioch towards the children of Yashriel. And it's very important that they were told this before they came to Antioch. Abstain from meats offered to idols. It's because the Gentiles of Antioch, the heathens of Antioch, were eating all of this stuff. Revelations chapter 2, verse 14. But I have these few things against you. You have some who hold the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. So when you think about that, here we are again. Some people would say, well, this stuff has all been made clean now. That's the argument. But I'm providing more context to get you deeper, than what people want to stick with on the surface. because a stumbling block is something that prohibits the path, that will prohibit the walk, that will stop you getting from the destination or slow you down. And, when it comes to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block, okay, so that they might eat food sacrificed to idols and practice sexual immorality. Revelations chapter 2, verse 20. This is where a lot of these religious theologians and teachers that are out there justifying, people eating food sacrificed to idols, you can see biblically from the beginning to the end, Yashriel was told to abstain from eating food sacrificed to idols. The problem is, in organized religion, they're never going to let anyone know who is, by lineage. They're not going to teach anything that's going to prompt your mind and say, man, that might be me. I told you, they're going to teach you from the perspective of the Gentiles, because, the Most High Yah told Yashriel not to follow the ways of the Gentiles, and eating food that's, unclean is the way of the Gentile. Revelations 2:20, but I have this against you, that you tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess and is teaching and seducing my servants to practice sexual immorality and to eat food sacrificed to idols. Here we are again. So it's a common thing, food sacrificed to idols. Now, you have plenty of people out there who don't fear the Most High Yah and keep the commandments, but are involved in the theology, in the doctrines, the different doctrines used in religion that will, be sent by the serpent to try to tell you that this stuff is good. There's no problem with it. You can go ahead and eat it. It's been cleansed. These are people teaching the doggone doctrine of demons. And this is why they won't show you this. With the children of Yashriel currently being in exile and not owning any of the food manufacturing companies, we have to exercise caution as to what we are putting in our bodies, i.e. our temples. The laws of the Most High Yah were given unto Israel, and the heathens know that. They will try to attempt through their pagan religion to tell you that you yourselves are Gentile and these foods are okay to eat because of that. The main goal of the heathens is to keep you from the promises that the Most High Yah promised Israel. I want you to understand that. That is the reason for a stumbling block. And last week I revealed to you that it was at Antioch that they established this pagan religion and these pagan customs. Okay? So just to give you a basic in-depth, if we're talking about pork or swine specifically, the children of Yashriel don't own any of these manufacturing. So we're not able to vet the process and say, hey, why is that in there? Oftentimes, if you have not done the research and studied and know what to look for on this stuff, you will be very well consuming, swine and pork ignorantly, because it's in a lot of stuff that is common in Western culture. Okay, food and products that contain swine, chili sauces. Think about that for people that like to use chili sauces in their cooking. Some potato chips, cupcakes. Okay, cupcakes specifically that's made with lard. Okay, some sodas. This is breaking this down to a minute level. Okay, refrigerated biscuits, products containing gelatins. When you're looking at gummy bears, fruit snacks, man, you have to do independent research. When you were in Christendom or Catholicism or whatever, nobody's going to tell you to do in-depth research to find out, okay, how to recognize the gelatin that does not have swine in it, byproducts, versus gelatin that does. So you can make sure you adhere to what the Most High Yah has asked us to do. Kellogg's fruit snacks, as well as other fruit snacks, cooking lard, Jello. Man, I tell you, once I learned this, man, you start looking at the ingredient labels and you're like, man, boy, they didn't put this stuff in everything. Some shampoos that have that thick consistency. Some wine. When it comes to all wines are not created equal. Chewing in bubble gum, cream cheese, fruit juice with added vitamins, hairbrushes. For a lot of the children of Yashriel, you're worried about getting them waves in your head. See, they're using these bristles on these brushes made from pig hair. Water filters. Dang, so even the water filtration systems, crayons, adhesives, blood thinners. Okay, now we're getting into medication, insulin, vaccines like nasal spray, influenza, thyroid medications, gelatin medicine capsules. So when you're taking these capsules, made out of gelatin, this is why some of these vitamins and medicines will say that they got organic, organic capsules. Okay, give you another little bit of history. So the sports games that Westerners like, that they adopted from the Romans, and you can read about the history if you want to read about the origins of, the Olympics and the different sporting events. Man, that's all biblical stuff that they don't show you. Okay. When did the football stop being made of pigskin? Because it once was made of pigskin. And you got to think about who is the main audience, who is the main targeted group that they use for athletes. Fortunately, blowing up pig bladders fell out of fashion for both pro and recreational football players with the invention of vulcanized rubber in the 1860s. Now they're using leather and rubber. Facts about health concerns of eating or consuming pork. Now, one thing about this is I'm going to go over some risk statistics, and you'll realize that in their agenda to defile us, and you're going to see this later on when I present it, it's only a certain demographic of people that are extremely high risk because our temples are being defiled by this. Okay, pork is associated with an increased risk of colon and rectum cancer. How is it that these folks know by a certain age of 30 or by a certain age of 40, that black, people need to go get, seen to ensure that they don't have it? There has to be something on the other side suspecting of them that specifically, black people might have it because they know we're at risk for it. Okay. It is also linked to other cancers such as prostate and pancreatic cancer. Man, make no doubt about it. You're going to leave this world some way, shape, form, or fashion. But in you not knowing behind the scenes that there's an agenda to defile your temple by the heathens and has been, man, this is going to lead to an early departure by way of some of these sicknesses and illnesses that I'm talking about. African American males, okay, are the highest risk for colon cancer. African Americans have the highest rate of rectal cancer in the United States. Black people have the highest overall cancer death rate in incidence in the United States compared to other racial and ethnic groups. Black adults have the highest prevalence of hypertension in the United States compared to other ethnicities, high blood pressure. Black adults in the United States have a higher prevalence of gout than any other ethnic or racial group. Processed meats like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, ham, salami, and bologna are carcinogenic to humans. What does carcinogenic means? Adjective, having the potential to cause cancer. So when you think about that, man, it's not either you know or you don't know. And for those out there that you love it, I can guarantee you probably, if we peel back the layers of your life, there's some things in the word that you reject even outside of the Most High Yah's Torah that you full well reject in order to keep what your flesh desires, which is some of this. So, hey, you're the way you take care of your temple, man, it is life, prolongs, life. But if you defile your temple, man, you're leading yourself to an early grave. The worst food that you can eat that increases your chance of high cholesterol because it is the meat with the highest amount of saturated fat. This is swine. Pork is known to cause hypertension due to the high amounts of saturated fat and salt contents used for curing it. So if you tuned in with me last week, you saw I got knee deep into the book of First Maccabees, and I'm gonna hit a couple touch points before I get us into Maccabees chapter 2. Okay, Maccabees chapter 1 verse 20 through 25. In the year 143 after the conquest of Egypt, Antiochus marched with a great army against the land of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. Antiochus was against Israel. In his arrogance, he entered in the temple and took away the golden altar, the lampstand with all its equipment, the tables for the bread offered to the Lord, the cup and the bowls, the gold fire pans, the curtains and the crown. He also stripped all the gold from the front of the temple and carried off the silver and gold and everything else of value, including all the treasures that he could find stored there. Then he took it all to his own country. He also murmured many people and boasted arrogantly about it. There was great mourning everywhere in Israel. Man, this is the nature of the heathen. This is the kind of stuff that they do as far as, coming against the Most High Yah and his people. First Maccabees chapter 41 verse 43. Antiochus issued a decree that all nations in his empire should abandon their own customs and become one people. This is the Hellenization, because we were scattered at this point. And now he is trying to get everybody to conform to his heathen ways. All the Gentiles and many of the Israelites submitted to the decree. They adopted the official pagan religion, offered sacrifices to idols, and no longer observed the Sabbath. So this is why the Sabbath is a sign between the Most High Yah and his people. We see what these heathens were doing, these Israelites, these Hellenistic Israelites. First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 44 through 53. The king also sent messengers with a decree to Jerusalem and all the towns of Judea, ordering the people to follow the customs that were foreign to their country. He ordered them not to offer burnt offerings, grain offerings, or wine offerings in the temple, and commanded them to treat the Sabbath and festival as ordinary work days. When the Pope signed off and made it a civil decree, as Antiochus did, this is basically allowing people now to think it's normal to violate the Sabbath. They were even ordered to defile the temple and the holy things in it. They were commanded to build pagan altars, temples, and shrines, and sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals there. So the swine is not the only unclean animal, and we see that biblically. They were forbidden to circumcise their sons and were required to make themselves ritually unclean in every way they could. Who's requiring this of them? It's the heathens, so that they would forget the law which the Lord had given through Moshe and would disobey it. So when your temple is defiled, that has something to do with your ability to receive truth. Let me say that again. When your temple is defiled, that has something with your ability to be able to receive truth. The penalty for disobeying the king's decree was death. The king not only issued the same decree throughout his own empire, but he also appointed officials to supervise the people and command each town in Judea to offer pagan sacrifices. Many of the Yahudim were ready to forsake the law and to obey these officials. They defiled the land with their evil, and their conduct forced all true Israelites to hide where they could. So basically, these actions, these unbecoming actions, forced those that was 10 toes down about obeying the Most High Yah to go into hiding. First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 59 through 64. On the 25th of the month, the same evil people offered sacrifices on the pagan altar on the top of the altar in the temple. The 25th of the month. What do heathens like? What do they tell you is the birth of Messiah but cannot prove it? Mothers who had allowed their babies to be circumcised were put to death in accordance with the king's decree. So Antiochus was showing his violation of the commandments. Their babies were hung around their necks, and their families and those who had circumcised them were put to death. But many people in Israel firmly resisted the king's decree and refused to eat food that was ritually unclean. They faced the persecution. They preferred to die rather than to break the holy covenant and eat unclean food, and many did die. Okay, for all of those people that say, well, we don't have to worry about that, we're New Testament only. Man, go read Jeremiah chapter, Jeremiah, I think it's 31, verse 31 through 34. When the Most High Yah tells you who the new covenant is for. And he tells you further down that he wrote those laws on your inward parts. Says they preferred to die rather than to break the holy covenant and eat unclean food, and many did die. In his anger, Yah made Israel suffer terribly. So when you think about this, a lot of the disobedience in the rebellion that Israel committed early on, a lot of these same people, man, they were the ones that was folding at the decree of King Antiochus. They were folding. You got to understand, Israel was scattered due to their rebellion. How much more we today are we in our lifestyles trying to justify this stuff rather than hearkening unto the law, statutes, and precepts that the Most High Yah gave us? Getting into Second Maccabees, because this is going to really bust it wide open. Not long after that, the king sent an elderly Anthian to force the Jews to abandon their religion and the customs of their ancestors. He was also to defile their temple by dedicating it to the Olympian god Zeus. So when you get into this, this is like when you see the Olympics and stuff like that, that has biblical ties. The temple of Mount Gerizim was to be officially named Temple of Zeus, the god of hospitality, as the people who lived there had requested. The oppression was harsh and almost intolerable. Gentiles filled the temple with drinking parties and all sorts of immorality. That looks like the modern church today. They even had intercourse with prostitutes there. Forbidden objects were brought into the temple, and the altars was covered with detestable sacrifices prohibited by our law. You see that it's referencing, okay, the law of the children of Yasharel that was given unto them. Verse 6 says, it was impossible to observe the Sabbath, to celebrate any of the traditional festivals, or even so as much to admit being a Yahudim. Okay? And Yahudim, Judah, and then modern translation, Jew, to try to insert Judaism. Each month when the king's birthday was celebrated, the Yahudim were compelled by brute force to eat the intestines of sacrificed animals. I'm going to get to that later on because, modern day soul food and black culture, man, they love them some pig's booty lining. They love them doggone chitlins. And it is that rebellion to where your temple is so defiled that you can't even realize the truth about who you are. Then during the festival in honor of the wine god Dionysus, they were required to wear ivy wreaths on their head and march in procession. On the day of, Ptolemy, the neighboring Greek cities were also instructed to require Yahudim to eat the sacrifices. Here we go. They are being forced to eat these sacrifices. Food sacrificed to idols. They were told to put to death every Yahudim who refused to adopt the Greek way of life. Their goal from the beginning has been to defile your temple. It was easy to see that hard times were ahead. For example, two women were arrested for having their babies circumcised. They were paraded around the city with their babies hung from their breasts. Then they were thrown down from the city wall. On another occasion, Philip was told that some Yahudim had gathered in a nearby cave to observe the Sabbath in secret. Philip attacked and burned them all alive. So this is why the heathens and the theologians come against you when you are keeping or trying to put the message out there that we are supposed to obey the Sabbath. But you know who they don't come against? They don't come to those who are, in Judaism. Why? Because that in itself is the synagogue of Satan. They're on the same side. That's why they don't have no smoke with them. Their smoke will come out of the woodworks, and they will use that Christendom rhetoric and doctrine, that replacement theology, to try to come an Israelite that says, okay, we are to keep the Sabbath, just as the Messiah, the disciples, the apostles did. They had such respect for the Sabbath that they would not fight to defend themselves. Verse 12, I beg you not to become discouraged as you read about the terrible things that happened. Consider that this was the Lord's way of punishing his people, not destroying them. In fact, it is a sign of kindness to punish a person immediately for his sins rather than to wait a long time. See, if you don't repent for your sins by the time your carnal life is over, man, that is it. So this is what this means. In fact, it is a sign of kindness for you to get some form of judgment now rather than later. The Lord does not treat us as he does other nations. He waits patiently until they have become deeply involved in sin before he punishes them. But before he punishes us, before we have sinned too much. So the Lord is always merciful to us, his own people. Although he punishes us with disaster, he never abandons us. And you see that. The Messiah, Hamashiach, gave us a way home after the Messiah divorced us. I have made these few observations by way of reminder. We will now get on with the story. There was an elderly and highly respected teacher of the law by the name of Eleazar, whose mouth was being forced open to make him eat pork. How many times do I have to say this? They was forcing this on people. But he preferred an honorable death rather than a life of disgrace. So he spit out the meat and went willingly to the place of torture, showing how people should have courage to refuse unclean food, even if it cost them their lives. See, the average person ain't willing to do it. They'll sit up and become Hellenistic and join in with the heathens. Those in charge of the sacrifices had been friends of Eleazar for a long time, and because of his friendship, they told him privately to bring meat that was lawful for him to eat, so they tried to help him out. Hey, this food that we serving up in here, it's unclean for you. It's sacrificed to idols. Bring some meat that's clean for you to eat. He needed only to pretend to eat the pork, they said, and this way he would not be put to death. But Eleazar made a decision worthy of his gray hair and advance in age. I want you to think about that. If you pretend to give in, that sends the message, okay, if he did it, then we can do it too. All his life he had lived in a perfect obedience to Yah's holy law. So he replied, kill me here and now. Such deception, okay? Deception, divination, man, that's the sin of witchcraft. He says, such deception is not worthy of a man of my many years. Many young people would think that I have denied my faith after I was 90 years old. If I pretended to eat this meat just to live a little while longer, it would bring shame and disgrace on me and to lead many young people astray. For the present, I might be able to escape what you could do to me, but whether I live or die, I cannot escape. I cannot escape Almighty Yah. If I die bravely now, it will show that I deserve my long life. It will also set a good example of the way young people should be willing and glad to die for our sacred and respected laws. The whole Gentile and heathen agenda is to tell you that the laws is done away with. And I've cracked the code on that before. Anybody that teaches that, you need to ask them, then what am I repenting for? Because if sin is the transgression of the law, and sin and the law is what shows a person their sins, and you don't want me to acknowledge that, what do you got people repenting for? As soon as he said these things, he went off to be tortured. Man. And the very people who had treated him kindly a few minutes before now turned against him because they thought he had spoken like a madman. When they had beaten him almost to the point of death, he groaned and said, "The Lord possesses all holy knowledge. He knows I could have escaped these terrible sufferings and death, yet he also knows that I gladly suffer these things because I fear him." So Eleazar died, but his courage, his death, was remembered as a glorious example not only by young people, but by the entire nation as well. 2 Maccabees chapter 7. On another occasion, an Israelite mother and her 7 sons were arrested. The king was having them beaten to force them to eat pork. So these people was literally getting beat to eat pork. Then one of the young men said, "What do you hope to gain by doing this? We would rather die than to abandon the traditions of our ancestors." This made the king so furious that he gave orders for huge pans and kettles to be heated red hot, and it was done immediately. Then he told his men to cut off the tongue of the one who had spoken and to scalp him and chop off his heads and feet, while his mother and 6 brothers looked on. After the young men had been reduced to a helpless mass of breathing flesh, the king gave orders for him to be carried over and thrown into one of the pans. As a cloud of smoke streamed up from the pan, their brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die bravely, saying, "The Lord Yah is looking on and understands our suffering." Moses made this clear when he wrote the song condemning those who had abandoned the Lord. He said, "The Lord will have mercy on those who serve him." After the first brother had died in this way, the soldiers started amusing themselves with the second one by tearing the hair and the skin from his head. Then they asked him, "Now will you eat this pork?" So they wanted to pretty much sacrifice somebody and put that fear upon him and say, "Now will you eat this pork? Or do you want us to chop off your hands and feet one by one?" He replied in his native language, "I will never eat it." So the soldiers tortured him, just as had done the first one. But his dying breath, he cried out to the king, "You butcher, you may kill us, but the king of the universe will raise us from the dead and give us eternal life." Man, this is righteous because we have obeyed his laws. The soldiers began entering themselves with the third brother. When he was ordered to stick out his tongue, he quickly did so. Then he bravely held out his hands and courageously said, "God gave these to me, but his laws mean more to me than my hands, and I know Yah will give them back to me again." The king and those with him were amazed at his courage and his willingness to suffer. And he had died. And the soldiers tortured the fourth one in the same cruel way, but his final words were, "I'm glad to die at your hands because we have the assurance that Yah will raise us from death. But there will be no resurrection to life for you, Antiochus." Antiochus was wicked. A lot of these theologians will say, well, they was called Christians first at Antioch, but they won't tell you none of the other rich history that gives more context of the heathen nature at Antioch. When soldiers took the 5th boy and began torturing him, he looked the king squarely in the eye and said, "You have the power to do what you want with us, even though you also are mortal. But do not think that Yah has abandoned our people. Just wait. Yah will use his great power to torture you and your descendants." The soldiers took the 6th boy, and just before he died, he said, "Make no mistake, we are suffering what we deserve because we have sinned against our Yah. That is why all these terrible things are happening to us. But don't think that for a minute that you will avoid being punished for fighting against Yah." The mother was the most amazing one of them all, and she deserves a special place in our memory. Although she saw her 7 sons die in a single day, She endured it with great courage because she trusted in the Lord. She combined womanly emotion with manly courage and spoke words of encouragement to each of her sons in their native language. I do not know how your life began in my I do not know how your life began in my womb, she would say. I was not the one who gave you life and breath and put together each part of your body. It was Yah who did it. Yah who created the universe. Yah who created humankind and all that exists. He is merciful and will give you back life and breath again because you love his laws more than you love himself. Antiochus was sure that the mother was making fun of him, so he did his best to convince her youngest son to abandon the traditions of his ancestors. He promised not only to make the boy rich and famous, but to place him in a position of authority and to give him the title Friend of the King. But the boy paid no attention to him, so Antiochus tried to persuade the boy's mother to talk him into saving his life. After much persuasion, she agreed to do so. Leaning over her son, she fooled the cruel tyrant by saying in her native language, "My son, have pity on me. Remember that I have carried you in my womb for 9 months and nursed you for 3 years. I have taken care of you and looked after all your needs unto the present day. So I urge you, my child, look at the sky and the earth, consider everything that you see, and realize Yah made it all from nothing, just as he made mankind. Don't be afraid of this butcher. Give up your life willingly and prove yourself worthy to your brothers, so by the Yah's mercy I may receive you back with them at the resurrection." Before she could finish speaking, the boy said, "King Antiochus, what are you waiting for? I refuse to obey your orders. I only obey the commands in the law which Moses gave to our ancestors. You have thought up all kinds of cruel things to do to our people, but you won't escape the punishment that Yah has in store for you. It is true that our living Lord is angry with us and is making us suffer because of our sins, in order to correct and discipline us. But this will last only for a short while, for we are still his servants, and he will forgive us. But you are the cruelest and most disgusting thing I've ever you are the cruelest and most disgusting thing that ever lived. So don't fool yourself with the illusions of greatness while you punish Yah's people. There is no way for you to escape punishment at the hands of the Almighty. In seeing Yah, my brothers suffered briefly because of our faithfulness to Yah's covenant, but now they have entered eternal life. But you will fall under Yah's judgment and be punished as you deserve for your arrogance. I now give up my body and my life for the laws of our ancestors, just as my brothers did. But I also beg Yah to show mercy to his people quickly and to torture you until you are forced to acknowledge that he alone is Yah. May my brothers and I be the last to suffer the anger of Almighty Yah, which he has justly brought upon the entire nation." These words of ridicule made Antiochus so furious that he had the boy tortured even more cruelly than his brothers. And so the boy died with absolute trust in the Lord, never unfaithful for a minute. Man, you're talking about prepare your soul for temptation. They were tempted, and this boy was pretty much said, "Hey, I'll give you racks on top of racks, man. You'll have the title of being friend of the king. You'll be rich and famous." Verse 41, last of all, the mother was put to death. But I have said enough about the Yahudim being tortured and being forced to eat the intestines of sacrificed animals. Okay, so let's dive into that. The intestines of sacrificed animals. You know, Hellenistic Israelites, black people, African American, in the American South began eating chitlins during the pre-Civil War era when they were given the less desirable parts of pigs by their enslavers. So now you see some of this treatment and how they were given this stuff during the transatlantic slave trade, during, slave history. This is not our customs. These are not our traditions. This is things that the Gentiles forced upon us. And you see a lot of our ancestors, they gave in. They buckled in. They weren't 10 toes down. Gentiles in the ancient world have had a long customary practice. When you look behind Christian observances that originate from paganism, you will see that consuming swine was a part of the original practice. Heavenly ham, if you've heard of that, people say, oh, it's a heavenly ham. Heavenly ham got its name from Harry J. Hohenzollern, a Gentile, after he opened the first honey baked store in Detroit in 1957. Due to the idea that the taste and quality of the ham is so exceptional, it is considered to be the most heavenly in his eyes, or divinely delicious, implying a high level of satisfaction and enjoyment when eating it. So this lets you know, man, that it is their culture, it is their customs to eat this. Some pagan customs that involved eating pork include animal sacrifices, feasts, and celebrations. Animal sacrifices. Okay, in Greece, pigs were sacrificed to gods, okay, especially those that preferred swine over other animals. In Canaan, pigs were offered as sacrifice in idolatrous worship. Yuletide, Norwegians sacrificed a wild boar and ate ham to celebrate the pagan god Fry. The feast, the pagan love feast. These feasts were celebrated with immorality and feasting, okay, of swine. Christmas, the Anglo-Saxons adopted the Scandinavian and German customs of eating ham during Yuletide. So this is breaking down, all of the stuff that we see modern day people doing that don't understand where this stuff came from. Yuletide, Norwegians celebrated Yuletide to honor the pagan god Fry. Okay, pigs and boars were sacred animals in Celtic pagan culture, and their meat was eaten as a special occasion at feast. This is the history from it. Like I said in today's Shabbat message, I wanted to show you that these heathens have had a long, outstanding history in trying to defile the children of Yashriel. This is why you have to think about, this is why they wanted to replace our theology. This is why they don't want you looking in certain parts of the Bible to focus you in on this. Okay, you got pastors out there that will say the Apocrypha is not part of the Bible. Well, if your pastor uses a KJV Bible that came out, has 66 books in it, he's not going to tell you that the original KJV that came out in the year 1611 had all 80 books in it, including these books. Now you can see why they want this removed from the book, which they removed in 1885 and came out with that 66 book version, because it's hiding a lot of what they did to the children of Yashriel. And this goes on and on. As you get into these missing books, you're going to find out their true nature, their true rebellion against the Most High Yah, and what they did unto the children of Yashriel, trying to force them to eat food sacrificed unto idols. And now, after knowing this, you can do your own independent research, and I encourage you to study, what other food is sacrificed to idols, and look it up in different cultures and things like that, because it's your salvation that's on the line. And you see righteously that there was those of the Yahudim that would rather die than to have their temple defied, knowing that they had already transgressed against the Most High Yah and were trying to live a life that bared fruit of repentance. This is what they're not going to tell you. These statistics that I gave you as far as the health issues that plague our community. This is where this stuff comes from. The love of this stuff, the love of things that the Most High Yah has called abominable, has called unclean, has told us to abstain from food sacrifice, to idols, other deities that he does not acknowledge, deities that don't have no power. Today, man, I hope I've said something to get you a couple layers deeper than the surface of world religion has done, to give you understanding. Because in, these books, there's a lot of identity. There's a lot of rich history that People are not going to show you because they're so content with giving ear ticklish, lukewarm messages that aren't going to correct your walk. But when I put it blatantly in your face and show you how these Gentiles, how Antiochus and his people truly operated, you will understand the title. And the heathens' goal has always been to defile the temple of the Yashriel. When they went up in there and stole all the stuff out, when they went in there and turned it into a cesspool for idolatry, this is their culture. This is their nature. I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your day, on this beautiful Sabbath, and truly can get some rest. Seek out the Most High Yah. Thank him for allowing us to make it another week and to be able to enter into this rest. Close to the Yah Ministries, kicking it gun barrel straight.